So what I want to talk with you about this week is freedom. I think a lot about freedom. A lot of my spiritual practice is around freedom. And in class on Tuesday, one of my students, Alita, said that she was developing not succumbing to her reactions. And I thought, what an incredible description of freedom. To have the freedom not to react, to have the freedom to rise, to have the freedom to find in that moment when reaction could be really easy, right? Where we could easily fall in, where I have easily fallen into reacting, instead finding that freedom within myself, that higher self within me, so that I can rise, so that you can rise beyond whatever we think the circumstances are. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have spent an awful lot of time after the fact going, oh, what I thought was going on wasn't going on at all. Or am I the only one? You know? And so having that freedom to not react, having that freedom to find within ourselves that place that is higher, that is beyond whatever the circumstances may look like, simply gives us that breath to see what really needs to be brought to it instead of what we might think needs to be brought to it. Because a lot of times, even when we take that breath, what comes up for us is our normal pattern of what we think is needed, right? Oh, this is what's going to help this situation. Maybe. A lot of times I've noticed that when we respond even from that place of thinking that this is what's needed, then we find out, oh, that didn't work so well either. Maybe it needed a couple more breaths. Maybe it needed a little bit more time to rest in here. Freedom, right? Freedom. Freedom is also the need not to fix. One of our things here is, one of the things I say a lot up here is transformation does not rectify. It transmutes. And so when we are in that space of rectifying, of repair, of thinking we know how to make this better, we are not yet in that space of what's possible with transformation. A lot of times, I've noticed in my life, when things fall apart is when true transformation happens. I know in the organization Ash belongs to, Evolving Wisdom, they talk a lot about breakdown before breakthrough. So when we're in breakdown, that doesn't automatically mean there's a problem. But it can sure look that way. I know it does to me, right? That a lot of times when there's things in breakdown, it looks like, oh, this is a problem. This is something that needs fixing. This is, oh, what do I need to do to get in there? And if I don't take the breath to relax into, wait a minute, I'm the one calling this a problem, then I can and have succumbed to reaction. And there's no freedom there. That is not where freedom lives. Freedom lives in our ability to rise, to allow, to whatever goes on. And that's not easy, and so we have what's called spiritual practices. And one of the things that I've noticed for myself is that my toolbox of spiritual practices continues to grow, right? We go along, maybe you've taken some classes here, maybe you haven't yet. I'm hoping you do. Because what we'll do in these classes is give you some tools for your spiritual toolbox. Some ways of being when things hurt, when things feel bad, when things go wrong. And then maybe you've been other places where you've gained some spiritual tools. So your spiritual toolbox starts to grow. And the thing that you don't want to do with your spiritual toolbox is think that there are old tools in there that need thrown out. That what you did earlier might not work anymore, and so you'll just not even think about that. Because what I have found is there are certain situations where the tools I'm learning recently more, apply. But then sometimes they don't work in that moment. They worked in another moment, right? Like, for instance, spiritual mind treatment. We talk a lot about spiritual mind treatment here. And it's very powerful, and it works really well, and maybe not all the time. Maybe you do a spiritual mind treatment, and then you're still upset. You're still not able to reach that higher self. And so you start thinking, spiritual mind treatment doesn't really work. That's not what's going on. What's going on is it may be not the right tool for the moment you're in. So you reach for a different tool. Because spiritual tools work. There is one that will support you in rising through whatever you need to rise through. There is always the tool. So that's one of the questions I ask myself all the time. What do I need to do to love myself now? If I'm upset and I'm focused on what I'm upset about, then I'm not handling the spiritual practice that can actually transform me in the situation I'm in. When I ask myself, what can I do to love myself now? I'm giving myself an opportunity to allow my higher self, what I like to call soul's intention, to speak to me, to tell me what will actually work now. And so this past week, I was in a bit of a state. And I was pacing my house back and forth, as Ash is sitting there watching me pace back and forth. And then all of a sudden, I remembered a chant that I haven't heard or thought about since my 20s. I'm 70. And it was a chant I hadn't heard or thought of since my 20s. And it popped into my head, and I was like, wow, where did that come from? But I was asking the question, what do I need to do to love myself now? I'm asking that question. And so, what mostly works for me brilliantly is simply deep breathing, right? If I can go into my deep breathing exercise, calms me down almost every time. It wasn't calming me down now. So what do I need to do? And this chant pops into my head. Maybe some of you have heard it, because it is a fairly common known chant, just not one that I have thought of or related to in ages. Nam Yo Ho Renge Kyo. Nam Yo Ho Renge Kyo. It's a Buddhist chant. And so it popped up, and I just started saying it over and over and over. And sure enough, I could feel my nervous system finally start to relax. Because another realization I had this week is it really is about my nervous system. It really is about your nervous system and whether it's overloaded or not. It's that simple, right? There's something so simple about all this. And the further I get into it, the simpler it is appearing for me. And so it all comes down to it's easy for me to stay calm and focused and in my higher place if my nervous system isn't overreacting. Go figure, right? So I could feel myself start to relax, and I'm starting to calm down. I stop pacing, I sit down. I get on YouTube, I actually find a video, 15-minute video of that chant and say it along with it for 15 minutes. And afterwards, I'm like, And I've been doing it all week, right? I mean, in fact, Ash and I have decided to set up a weekly chant for anybody who'd like to join us. There's a sign-up sheet in the back. We're going to be doing it online on Zoom for 15 minutes, and if you can believe it, it's going to be at 7:30 a.m. on Fridays. I'm going to be there. In my pajamas, and it's only 15 minutes. You know, we all got to grow in our own ways, you know. For those of you who don't know, I am not a morning person, so this is quite a leap for me. But I was just so excited about how much it calmed my system that when I spoke to Ash about it, she said, yeah, well, let's do more than just that chant. Let's get other chants and you know, let's mix it up and just have this chant Friday morning for 15 minutes. And so there's a sign-up sheet in the back for that. And anybody on that list we'll send out the link to. You could show up, and it'll be the same link every week. And so you come, you don't come, you do what you want with that. There's no charge or nothing, just we're chanting, so we thought we'd invite you all along the ride. So that's in the back. And so here was the thing about it. So I calmed down, and I'm feeling a lot better about this. And then I decide, you know, I wonder what it means. Here I am saying this thing. What does it mean? I mean, because God knows what I could be saying. Right? Well, I was very happy to learn that what it means is this: I dedicate my life to the mystic law of cause and effect as a lived awakening. I dedicate my life to the mystic law of cause and effect as a lived awakening. Now, I can get behind that in a heartbeat. And so I thought, yeah. And so I shortened it for myself because I like concise. And so when I am doing it in English, I am saying, I dedicate my life to the mystic law of lived awakening. Because that's what I want. I want to live in that awakened place. I absolutely dedicate my life to that. That is absolutely the most important thing to me, living that way. And so chanting that feels real good to me. If something around that entices you, join us. We're going to send it out and see if we can get people from all around the world who want to simply chant for 15 minutes at some god-awful hour in the morning. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say it that way. For all you morning people, however abnormal that may be, just teasing. So I had some great conversations this week around freedom and around these ideas with people that really sparked me, right? One was with Jamie, and we were talking about peace and balance, and how peace and balance isn't like a finished home you get to move into. You have to build it. You have to build it brick by brick. You don't get to one day go, now I'm going to start living in peace and balance, and think like, okay, and then try some discipline that's then going to fall apart. You got to build this thing. there's a foundation that really takes brick by brick. You know, one of the ways, I don't know if I've shared this before. I know I've shared it in class, but I don't know if I've ever shared it from up here. Is one of the things that I've noticed about my life is that I actually fall apart pretty easily. That my feelings get hurt, and I dissolve. But what's happened through the years is because that's happened so often, and each time I rose, it built a foundation that now I don't fall so far. And I don't have to stop myself from falling. I don't have to, work my way to being stronger to get up again. I'm not falling that far, so it's not that far to get up. Brick by brick. And so what I have found is there is a freedom in allowing myself to fall apart, to fall, because I count on myself to rise. And so, the image I got around that is like an A-frame, right? An A-frame house that then falls. And now these two pieces that were here are down here. And the next one then falls, and then it's here. And then the next one falls, and then it's here. And it just keeps getting higher up to where you don't fall very far. Now, I think what a lot of people do when they fall apart is they get afraid they're not going to be able to pull it back together. They think that's the way it is for the rest of their days. I was afraid of that. I remember a time when I was depressed for about 6 or 8 months that didn't know if it was ever going to end. And it wasn't until I realized that what was going on for me was I was being depressed about being depressed, that I was actually doubling down. That made me realize that, wait a minute, if I can be okay about being depressed, maybe I'll build a foundation here that allows me to rise easier. And sure enough, that's what happened over and over and over. Until now, when I get depressed, it lasts about 10 minutes. 15 maybe. But that's it. And it's not me trying to get out of it. And I think that anytime we try to get out of where we actually are, we are adding to that which we are and making it tougher to get out of it, even if it works that once. We haven't done anything to build a foundation to allow us to rise naturally, organically, that in each of us is a powerful, creative, spiritual being that can rise to something greater than ourselves. But if we are so sure that we got to do it, that by me kingdom that we talk about here sometimes, is if we got to force ourselves to do this, or I know people who are in being depressed or having a hard time right now, and they're surrounded by people who are trying to force them up. And that doesn't help. It doesn't help. If you're in that state, or you know somebody in that state and you think they ought to be doing different than they are, that doesn't help. That we all have our own way to freedom, our own way of finding it. God, one of the worst things I hear people say is, "You've been grieving for a year. You ought to be over it by now." I mean, how can anybody know what somebody else's process must be? We're all in our own process here, and the purpose of community is not to tell somebody else what they should be doing. It's to support the process that they have. And when we do that, then we rise together. When we get in a place of where we allow somebody, it's like saying, "I need you to be different so that I can be authentic." The way you're being authentic is making me feel unsafe, so I'm not getting to be authentic. So you need to be different. Am I the only one who's ever been in that scenario? And so the idea is can we create enough space? Can our space be large enough beyond these walls to the greater part of who we actually are that can allow for each of us to have the space of authenticity in the way we're having it, which is not going to look like how others think it ought to look like. And so, you know that, right? And how we can hold each other in that space of love so that the freedom that we want for ourselves is available to those who we can actually think are impinging on our freedom, which they actually can't do. It only can appear that way. It can only look that way. And when we let it look that way, then we get our feelings hurt. When I let it look that way, I get my feelings hurt. Instead of remembering that they get to be upset about my authenticity because that's how they're being authentic. That space, that spaciousness needs to be there for all of us. And it isn't like there's a limited amount of space. We have the universe. And so I was having this great talk with Karina, and we were talking about how you can feel in yourself if you need to grow like there's something wrong with you. Otherwise, why would you need to grow? And the universe, which is absolutely whole and complete, keeps expanding. It keeps growing, and it's the universe. So we keep growing as our own universe, and we are whole and complete. And holding ourselves that way and not letting anybody else hold us differently. Nobody gets to tell you whether you're sincere, not sincere, whether you're doing it right, not doing it right. We develop life in our own way. And we don't need to protect ourselves from others. We just need to feel our own sense of universe here. Our own sense of universe. And stand there. It's not easy. It's a spiritual practice. But it's possible. And when I am in that state, I never feel freer. When I do not succumb to reaction, when I recognize that there's all these universes going on, and there's space for all of us, I can rise, you can rise. We could be greater than we are. That's the possibility here. We come together as community in the possibility of creating a spaciousness within ourselves and within the community that can hold way more than we think possible. Our minds can't comprehend this, but our hearts can. So I ask you now to let it into your heart. This spaciousness that's possible for all of us. If you would put your hand to your heart, be with me in this, please. And open to the spaciousness that allows for all that goes on here. Because that's where freedom lives. Freedom lives in the spaciousness. Can you feel it? Can you feel that? Freedom lives in the spaciousness. And then we are no longer fixing. We are transforming. Thank you. I love you.